We have one speaker and then some quotes from a couple of opposers. So Hugh Thomas is a partner at Foster & Partners, and he has been working on major infrastructure projects such as King's Cross and Wembley Stadium and St Pancras, and some very high-profile airport and railway projects overseas. And he's going to speak for about 20 minutes on the proposals that Foster & Partners put forward for an estuary airport. And so can you welcome him to the stand? Hugh, come on up. Yeah.
Thank you, and good afternoon. I'll start off by giving a little bit of background as to what we face as an economy and as a society, and the impact of population growth and demographic change. And a lot of people are talking about population growth, sheer numbers, but they're not really talking about the yellow line on that graph, which is the way that we're living today and the way we're forming households, and the fact that we're forming far more households per head of population than we have historically. And those graph lines are diverging. We have an extraordinary demand for front doors in this country. Through the recession, people have squeezed together. Young people have put off starting families. But that won't last forever. And what we're seeing now is the fastest growing birth rate since the 1950s. We're seeing extraordinary pressure on housing demand. And that is seen at its greatest in London. The pressures on London are absolutely extraordinary. To keep our economy afloat, to keep ourselves in homes, to keep the workers available to the city and the growth of the economy, we've got to find new areas to build homes. And this is showing population growth in the wards of London over the next 30 years. And what you're seeing there is the growth to the east. That's where people are being born, that's where they will be living, that's where their demand is. There is an inextricable demand for growth to the east. And what we've done over the last decade is concentrate on building in the centre. We haven't been addressing the east. And what we've got to do over the next decade is increase our house building over the whole of London, but dramatically to the east. And it's not just London. The whole of the country is growing, but it's the southeast and the east that is taking the brunt of that growth. So as London grows, so does the southeast, and there's a pressure from all those people who want homes, who are attracted to the London economy. Over 600,000 people a day commute for their workplace into London. We've got to provide homes for those workers. So there is this growth to the east. There is investment in the east. There is investment in infrastructure to support those new homes. But there's also a need for investment in infrastructure to support the jobs that those people will need. And what we've seen in this country is structural change. We've always led the world in creating new employment opportunities. Whether it was the Industrial Revolution, the Agrarian Revolution before it, the service sector revolution, or the new sectors. We hear so much in the papers today about the explosion of tech jobs, Silicon Roundabout, all of those new opportunities, and they're global jobs. Their jobs are about London being a global city integrated into a global marketplace. It's about Londoners finding work around the world. And the world is a world of cities. Cities are what's powering the world's economy now. Cities where people cluster, and cities that interact with each other, cities that need to connect. And when you look at where people live in the world, overwhelmingly they live in the northern hemisphere, above the Tropic of Cancer. So on the right-hand side, the blue lines are showing where population is, and the circles on that map of the world are showing where global GDP is. It's all in the north. And connectivity between those centres of GDP is absolutely critical to us, our children and our children's children, because that will be the future for us as an economy. It'll be a future for us as a society, how we integrate with the rest of the world. The further you go on the right-hand axis of the graph, the better connected you are in terms of short-haul flights. So London is incredibly well connected, as we all know, into Europe. That's very much Gatwick's argument. Connection short-haul into Europe. As you go up the graph, though, long-haul connectivity, you find that London is incredibly well connected to global GDP within a 13-hour flight. So London has an extraordinary advantage. That's why it's a global city. Has extraordinary advantage in terms of its connectivity. Only has that advantage if we put the capacity in for that connectivity to take place, though. And there you see virtually all of the world is reachable within a 13-hour flight. That's why long-haul capacity is so critical to us. You're not going to fly long-haul point-to-point from all of our regional airports. That's going to be concentrated. It's going to be concentrated to collect passengers together to fat routes. A fat route is a route that has a frequency of service. That's what we need in this country. We need a hub that attracts fat routes from around the rest of the world. The rest of the world recognizes this. The rest of the world, in just the last 12 months, has declared its interest in next generation global hubs. You've had China announcing Beijing South 5-runway airport. You've had Istanbul awarding the concession for their new 5-runway airport. You've had Dubai post-2020 winning of the Expo going hell for leather to build Al Maktoum International, a new 5-runway airport in Dubai. They've already got the busiest airport in the world and they're building the next generation. You've had Mexico City just within the last month hold a competition for the new global hub airport there. You've got Manila coming on stream now. That's the way the world is moving. That's the way the world is creating its connections. What are we doing? What are we doing in that changing marketplace? What are we doing in that changing world order? What's Northwest Europe going to do? How are we going to compete? How are we going to connect? Well, we think we've got extraordinary infrastructure. Previous presentations have touched on that, but we've only got one true hub. That's Heathrow. Gatwick and Stansted serve vital short-haul markets, low-cost carriers that serve their hinterland incredibly effectively. They will grow. They will grow where there is demand from their hinterland for those sorts of flights. They will not grow for those critical markets, for those long-haul markets. The only answer there is Heathrow. I would agree with virtually everything that John said in the earlier presentation, apart from the location. If Heathrow is politically undeliverable, how do we get those vital connections? If the issue is noise, if it's security, if it's risk, how are we going to provide that? The only solution is exactly what John says. If you can't do it at Heathrow, you have to build a new hub airport. And London is growing to the east. It's going in the grain of where we propose a new global hub airport on the Isle of Grain. That's where the investment is going. That's where the infrastructure is going. Not because of an airport. It's because we desperately need to provide the homes for people. That's why we say the Isle of Grain, if we have to build a new global hub airport, is the right solution. It's accessible not only from London, the wider southeast, the rest of the country, and Europe by very good rail infrastructure. It's also the least densely populated part of the country. Of course it's controversial. You can't propose a new 4-runway airport without attracting controversy. Of course it has enormous environmental impacts. Of course it has impacts on people who live there currently. But if that's what we need as a nation, if that's our critical infrastructure for the growth of our economy going forwards, that's what we've got to look at doing. It's attracted extraordinary controversy, but a lot of it is heated. We're pie in the sky, we're fantasy island. Not much of it is actually based on fact. And one of the first things we were hit by from Kent, we were told we weren't telling the truth about the scale of the airport. And they showed diagrams that showed the scale of JFK over the Hoo Peninsula. The reality, unfortunately, was measured in feet and drawn in meters. The true scale of JFK is there. The true scale of JFK, when you put it where we propose a global hub airport, is there. We propose learning the lessons from Heathrow, where we did the central master plan. We were the original base designers for Terminal 2. Where we've done airports around the world, we propose a next generation global hub, 4 runways, that can provide the sort of facilities we require, operating 24 hours a day, giving us that global connectivity. There's the island of Manhattan. There's the Hoo Peninsula. The island of Manhattan has 1,600 residents, 1.6 million residents, 1.5 million people commute there each day, as a daytime population of over 3 million. There's the Hoo Peninsula. There's the Hoo Peninsula overlaid over London, Heathrow at one end of it. 350,000 residents could live on the Hoo Peninsula if it was London, but they don't. There's 20,000 people live on the Hoo Peninsula, most of them to the west or the south. There's less than 3,000, somewhere around 2,600, 2,800, depending how you interpret census data, who would live under the footprint of the airport we propose. It's an area that has a history from large-scale infrastructure. It has Thames Port, it has redundant power stations. The chimney that you see in the centre there is currently under demolition. It has gas storage facilities. Gas storage facilities that were opened 4 years ago and have a 20-year design life. Gas facilities that take liquid natural gas from Qatar, whereas we're looking at how we create our own gas. We're in a changing energy market. What is the future of the Hoo Peninsula? What's the future of that large-scale infrastructure? And is this a suitable location for another piece of large-scale infrastructure? A suitable location that you can access by sea. We can build enormous pieces of this airport around the country, spread the economic benefit from construction, and just like the oil and gas industry does, bring them in by sea. We don't have the problems of trying to fit all of that infrastructure, squeeze it in on the congested road network, build that. We're surrounded by water. We can do it efficiently with minimal impact. We can share the benefits. Why is it so critical? We've heard about our European competitors, Frankfurt, Paris, Schiphol. Well, already Paris and Frankfurt do more air traffic movements, more aircraft land at Paris and Frankfurt than they do at Heathrow. And people are fascinated by the fact that they have room to grow. They're our competitors. They're out competing us. They're getting their advantage. They're eating our lunch. But they will become Heathrow. They will fill up. Europe isn't standing still. We don't have room to grow. And in a decade, according to Eurocontrol, the top 17 airports in Europe will be full. What does Europe do when Europe's full? Do we want to compete in a situation where our competitors are full as well? Because what will happen to the regional airports, they'll be squeezed out of those hubs in exactly the same way they were squeezed out of Heathrow. We will lose out. That's why we should be thinking about building a next generation hub. A hub that serves not only our demands and our children's demands, but Northwest Europe's demands. Is truly next generation global hub. That's why we say 24-hour operation, so we can get to anywhere in the world at any time. We open with 110 million passengers, which is a sensible provision, but we have the master plan that allows us to expand easily, simply, to 150 million plus. 4 runways, so we got resilience right from the outset. Adjacent to High Speed 1, accessible from Europe, accessible from the rest of the UK, accessible from London and the wider region. And critically, as any airport solution would have to be, deliverable by the private sector. Service predominantly by rail, taking a focus on public transport. Public transport that exists adjacent to the airport. We propose building 4 lines to connect into High Speed 1, the existing heavy rail network and extension of Crossrail. A rail strategy that allows us to do park and ride stations, pick people up from the motorway network so they don't congest the M25, allows us to run dedicated trains so that they go into a single baggage handling system at the airport, so you can check your bags in at a station and they go straight into the belly of the aircraft. We spent 6.5 years in Hong Kong seeing the closure of Kai Tak, the demolition of the island and the creation of the platform at Chek Lap Kok. This is consistently voted one of the best airports in the world. We did the master plan, we did the terminal buildings, we did the ground transportation, we did the cargo handling. And it's successful because of the ground surface access. It's successful because of the rail access to that airport. You can check in the centre of the city and go on a dedicated train to the airport. That's what we should be aiming to do in London. Only the Thames Estuary can offer that. Offer direct transport, so you get off a train, straight up an escalator, through into the gate to get on your plane. And it's not just passengers that need that connectivity. If we're to be an advanced manufacturing nation, if we're to make that next generation of technology that we're inventing in our universities and our companies now, we've got to get that stuff to market. That market is far-flung, and those high-value goods travel in the belly of an aircraft. They don't go on cargo planes, they go in the belly underneath passengers. That's why fat routes for passenger planes are so critical to our manufacturing economy as well as to us as travellers. An airport that's serviced by rail, not just for passengers, but can have rail access for goods. It's tied in, it uses the rail infrastructure to Thameспort, actually ties into a freight network strategy straight into the cargo handling, straight onto the planes. Exactly what Paris is doing right now. You'll see a rhomboid in there, if you can imagine where London is, where Paris is, where the German airports, Frankfurt is a major airport, and Holland. There's a rhomboid that forms on that diagram with planes arriving and taking off in Europe. Europe is facing right now an aviation capacity problem. It's getting worse, and that's why the European Union is addressing it through the Single Skies programme. That programme is essential to expansion anyway. If we decided it was Heathrow, if we decided it was Gatwick, we'd have to replan our airspace. It's no different for the estuary. But what people have done around the world, when they've had a large airport, when they've moved an airport, they've tended to site it in a coastal location. The top 30 airports in the world, 16 of those airports are based on the coast. The majority of those that aren't are simply because they're not on the coast. The cities they serve, the regions they serve aren't coastal regions. They're Beijing, they're Chicago. And we've heard something about noise. Well, we've heard a lot about noise. And the reality, doesn't matter what you tell us about aircraft getting quieter, they're too loud. I stand in Battersea Park, I hear a jumbo go over, and I hear an A380 follow it. As far as I'm concerned, and as far as millions of people are concerned, that's too loud. The future aircraft are still too loud. Our ears simply don't read the statistics. They don't care. It's too loud. In terms of cost, building a third runway at Heathrow is around about 15 billion. But it's not about a third runway, is it? It's about a fourth runway. It's about what we will need for future generations and where we make the next bet. That's what's critical about this argument now. And the next runway is where we will really pay to put the infrastructure in. You can start now, build a 4-runway airport, this critical juncture in the Thames Estuary for 20 billion. There's no disagreement really about the cost of building an airport. There's a conversation about the risk profile in terms of the cost allowances around optimism bias, but that's the same wherever you put the airport. There's a conversation around surface access, and TfL in the last month have done a phenomenal piece of work comparing the options and showing that an estuary airport is only 10% more than getting access to Heathrow. But the passenger is the one that pays. The passenger pays, and the passenger should be looking at what they get in terms of future opportunity. They'll have to close Heathrow. Passenger has to accept that global connectivity will be to the east, that the connections mean they'll have to travel to the east, but the connections will be good, they'll be fast, and they'll be convenient. You'll check your bags in and you'll get your bags into the belly of the aircraft. That's an extraordinary opportunity. 20 years from now, Heathrow as a new London borough. None of the proposals you've heard about today really can be done any quicker than any other proposal. The planning process for any of the proposals, be it Heathrow or Gatwick, is exactly the same. The point to where you turn the first sod of earth, the time is the same. Gatwick you can build faster, with probably about the same amount of time as Heathrow. So there's no quick answer to this. What there is a critical point in time where we make a bet for the future, where we decide where do we invest, what do we want, not only for ourselves but for future generations. In terms of how London develops, how the southeast develops, how the whole country develops, absolutely critical we have that hub capacity, those connections to those global markets. That's why we think a 4-runway, 24-hour airport is where that bet should be placed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. We've now got one estuary supporter and 2 estuary opposers. And sadly to say, our listed speaker, Clive Lawrence, is unable to be with us today. I think Jane Thompson did ask a couple of MPs if they could manage it, but they couldn't. Clive, as some of you might know, is the campaign director of the gloriously named drink, Demand Regeneration in North Kent, rather than a glass of wine. Now, it supports the plan for the Thames Estuary Airport, but at very short notice, Matthew Clark is here in the guise of Clive to read out his statement, and for doing that, we will not be submitting him to the trial by debate. So Matthew can just come up and say his few words and go and sit down again. So give Matthew a welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. As mentioned, I am here on behalf of Clive Lawrence. Full disclosure, Clive is my father-in-law. I am speaking his words, which sounds creepy, but I'll try to make it less creepy as we go along. I am from Medway, okay, which is North Kent, for those that aren't aware. So I do actually believe in what I'm about to tell you. So, from the point of view of the 500,000 people who live in North Kent, there's only one way to arrive at the right answer about the Estuary Airport. That is after a dispassionate review. Do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? A former boss of mine once said that if Kent is the Garden of England, the Medway Towns, where I'm from, is in fact the compost heap. Some could say that's unkind. I don't. Because there are some attractive parts. But he had a point. Look at the facts. Our primary schools are some of the worst in the country. The hospital authority is in the bottom 10 in England. There's a greater concentration of payday loan shops, overweight people, than almost anywhere else in the entire country. There are pockets of what official language calls severe deprivation throughout the area. In other words, poverty. Something I can testify to. Where I grew up, you were considered posh if you didn't have a fridge or a washing machine in your front garden. That's the area. Medway needs regeneration. There's little public money, so it's projects like this that are really the only hope. We're told that many thousands of permanent, well-paid jobs will be generated. Businesses will be attracted to the area. Well over £100 million a year will flow into public coffers to support public services, to help with the environment. And the 5 universities and higher education institutions will become global centres of airport and mass communication studies. Best of all, says a well-respected academic, professor no less, Richard Skase of the University of Kent, the standard of living of local people could reach that of Stockholm or Helsinki. It would make North Kent the envy of the UK. But the question is, will the price simply be too high? Will North Kent be concreted over? Will they have to shoot 300,000 birds? Will the roads be jammed with passengers attempting to get to the airport? And where will the workers be housed? Let alone the noise pollution that we hear about. Brilliant questions, fantastic questions. The good news is that none are insurmountable, and none hold up to close scrutiny. The whole project, and this is important, the whole project will be designed as a holistic unit, completely unlike the organic sprawl that you see at Heathrow. Many, Drink would like to say most, passengers will check in at terminals at Ebbsfleet, Docklands, and other locations, ready to join high-speed rail to make their way to the airport. Also, this isn't happening tomorrow. There's plenty of time to work out solutions to these challenges, as always happens with these large-scale engineering projects. I'll leave you with 3 quotes. We can't afford this. It'll ruin the environment. And this project simply isn't needed. You've heard these before, of course. In the 80s, when they were building the Channel Tunnel, and indeed more recently, when they planned the high-speed rail link between Folkestone and London. It seems every time there's a major engineering project, there's a massive show of opposition. It's easy to say no. What actually happens to that resolute, total resistance to the Channel Tunnel, to HS1? Nothing. Nothing happened. The projects have been so successful, that the contrary voices are now completely silent. What are the chances that the sound and the fury about the Estuary airport will disappear as well once it opens? Pretty damn good. So in summary, Drink, that is, Demand Regeneration in North Kent, believes that the benefits of an estuary airport far outweigh the disadvantages, and that the case is solid. I'm able to go off script now and say to those that oppose this, I think it's these 2 gentlemen here, especially since I'm not involved in the debate, bring it on. Thank you very much.
Well, I must say that was well read, wasn't it? Well read, well read. Okay, as Matthew mentioned, we've got the 2 people who are going to oppose the estuary. Paul Carter, who's leader of Kent County Council, is here with us to speak for 3 or 4 minutes on the topic. And he is going to be joined straight afterwards by the second opposer, who's Robin Cooper, who's Director of Regeneration, Community and Culture at Medway Council, which I've never quite heard described like that before, Matthew. But he holds a position which includes all the transportation and aviation side of thing. So, first of all, give Paul a welcome, and then he'll be followed immediately by Robin. So, Paul, over to you.
Thank you very much. I've been really pleased that I've been able to take the time out of a fairly busy diary to be here for the whole of today's proceedings, because much of what I've heard adds to my theory that Boris's proposal for a Boris Island, or now an estuary airport, were barking mad. And I found the presentation from Chris Chalk and from Deloitte's enormously compelling in compounding that view. In Kent, under my leadership, and indeed my predecessor, the great and late Lord Sandy Bruce Lockhart, we have done everything to help and support economic growth and prosperity in our county, and I think our track record very much supports that. And I would hate anybody to think that we in Kent, at Kent County Council, are in any way NIMBYs. We supported the high-speed one route through Kent. We did put propositions to government to get the route amendments, and we were successful in that. We have always supported the growth and expansion at Manston Airport, and are enormously saddened by the current closure of that airport, and indeed to a minor extent in Lydd. And we have supported the Davis Commission in the support for either Gatwick or Heathrow. We see a very compelling case, and all the statistics that we've seen today on global aviation growth and the population growth in this country very much support that view. And when in one of my previous jobs I was chairman of the South East Regional Assembly, we did a very significant report which looked also about maximising the opportunity around those regional airports where we have very much underutilised capacity at Stansted, Luton and of course Manston, to make sure that we maximise those opportunities along the need for a significant hub airport. But we at Kent County Council genuinely believe, for the reasons of geography, economics, infrastructure need and the environment, that the Estuary Airport is in the wrong place for that global hub airport to be. The geography, it's on the wrong side of town. And the Deloitte suggestion that you could upheave not just the airport, but the whole economy that is dependent upon that airport and spudded in the Hoo Peninsula is quite honestly absolutely ridiculous. And the maths don't add up. If you look at the cost of High Speed 2 against some of the costs that were put up in those few slides before, that doesn't, in my view, make sense in that comparator. And then if you marry together the infrastructure need and the cost of moving those dependent businesses and the people that will support in employment at the airport in that location, the infrastructure need is colossal. We've worked out that you would have to treble the capacity of Speed 1 out of London to link to that link across the Hoo Peninsula to the airport. Where's the money coming from to fund that rail infrastructure out of central London from St Pancras to the Hoo Peninsula? The geography is such that it's surrounded by water. You've got 270 degrees of water and the remaining bit funneled across out of London to that part of the county and Medway in the Isle of Grain. And finally, the environmental considerations. I was also born and bred in the Medway towns, and my bedroom window used to look out to the Hoo Peninsula, and my dad always used to say in the middle of winter, look out of that window, boy, there's not a lot between there and Siberia. And when the northeast wind blows, that Hoo Peninsula, the Isle of Grain, is one of the most inhospitable parts of the southeast of England, I can assure you, and is very, very prone also to coastal mist and fog. Not ideal, I would have thought, to an airport. And then on top of that, put in the RSPB's point about one of the most significant migratory pathways for wildlife in this country. So for many solid and profound reasons, I think we've got good cause to feed into the Davis review that the Hoo Peninsula, the Isle of Grain, is barking mad, is in the wrong location, and I very much hope that Sir Howard Davis will listen to us and make a decision between Gatwick and or Heathrow, and on that we remain agnostic. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon. Matthew threw down the challenge that there were two of us against this proposal. I would suggest there's slightly more than that. We've just commissioned a ComRes survey, a national survey, which found that 16% of the British public support the idea of Thames Estuary Airport. Put the other way, that is 84% of the population do not support a Thames Estuary Airport. So Paul and myself are certainly two of a very, very large number. To deliver this project in a democracy, you need public support, you also need political support. And it's quite interesting if you listen to Prime Minister's question time, when the Prime Minister said that this government has no plans to build an airport in the Thames Estuary, in Medway or Kent. The Liberal Democrats have said that they firmly reject a Thames Estuary Airport. The Labour Party have said that the Estuary Airport is a complete non-starter. UKIP have said Boris Island is simply insane. The Green Party have said that they would make sure that this Estuary Airport never got off the ground. There is no public support for this, or very little public support. There is also no political support. This project would be delivered over 3, 4, maybe even 5 parliaments. The big question is who would want to invest in a project of this enormity, and we've calculated it's £148 billion. To set that in context, that's 5 times the cost of the Olympics, High Speed 2 and Terminal 5. Put those projects together, multiply by 3, that is the sum we're looking at for this one airport with the infrastructure. So there doesn't appear to be a sufficient political support to continue with the project. There certainly isn't public support for it. The costs are absolutely astronomical. No one has ever attempted anything of this scale in this country. Hugh showed us a very seductive slide earlier. What he didn't show, of course, was the wildlife and the communities affected by this. There are 9 villages which would be destroyed. In fact, some of the residents are here today from those villages. And you would have to move 300,000 birds. That is the number of birds who overwinter on that site. We've currently got a planning application where we're looking to relocate 60. And the problems we're having with that is absolutely enormous. And certainly the interest from the Green Lobby and Natural England. If you multiply that and think of moving 300,000 birds, I'm not aware of anyone who's ever attempted that successfully anywhere in the world. You could shoot them. I suspect there would be quite a lobby against it, and simply the birds will come back. So, do you want to build an airport there? Can you build an airport there? No, as Paul said, it is absolutely in the wrong position. It's in the wrong place. It's not affordable. There is not public support for it, not just in Medway, but in the United Kingdom. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you. Right, okay, I've just got just a few questions for you, I think, because we're running up against time a little bit. I think it really, listening to the people in Kent saying this is a bad thing, it sounds like you're barking mad. It sounds like, why wouldn't Kent want something which would be the making of the county? You're just being NIMBY-ish about this, aren't you? I was looking at you, Paul. Sorry, I threw my glasses. Yeah.
I'm very happy to take that one. I mean, we're challenged with the expansion of London into the Thames Gateway. We've got the Garden City proposition now at Ebbsfleet, and exciting things going to happen there. We've got Paramount's potential investment on the Swanscombe Peninsula, which will create thousands of jobs.
That's never going to happen, is it? That.
It is gaining support. It's got to be funded.
That's more pie in the sky than the airport, isn't it?
Robin can talk about the enormously exciting things that are going on in Medway.
Yeah.
What we don't need, where the infrastructure is creaking at the seams, in supporting the housing growth, the growth in population in Kent is going up 1% every year, 10% every decade. We have a massive demand, predominantly from London into Kent, in keeping up with the demand side in the provision of housing, but most importantly the infrastructure.
Okay.
And to superimpose the potential for an airport being built there in 10 or 15 years will inhibit the significant investment that's needed from the private sector to grow the economy in the ways that are currently designed. The airport would get in the way.
So you prefer a theme park to an airport, essentially? That's what's going on here, isn't it?
Well, national government is excited by the proposition. If you marry what is proposed on the Swanscombe Peninsula to the massive leisure and tourism industry in London and the importance and significance of tourism in Kent, it is quite it's wacky, but it is an exciting proposal which does have credibility.
Does it? Okay. Right, okay. Hugh, you were talking about some numbers. It's easy to build an airport out in the sea, piece of cake, I should think, but getting the infrastructure to it is not a piece of cake. Do your figures include the cost of getting the trains and the buses to, what should we call it? I think it needs a name, doesn't it, this airport? We can't call it Boris Island, obviously, but think a name up. What do you call it?
We call it Thames Hub.
Thames Hub, okay. That's pretty boring, really, isn't it, Thames Hub? Yeah.
It's pretty boring for now, but when we get started, it'll get pretty exciting.
Yeah. Okay.
The connectivity back to where passengers come from and want to go to.
Who's going to pay for it all, that connectivity?
That'll be paid for by the airport. 20 billion to build it, and we've got 8 billion in for the transport links.
Okay.
I simply don't recognise, and I can't see TfL recognising the figure of trebling capacity on High Speed 1. High Speed 1 has actually got a lot of capacity on it. And the Kent commuter service enhancing that to get to the airport doesn't just enhance access to the airport. It actually enhances access to Kent and the wider economy there. So, us putting in that investment is beneficial to the wider area. And the Department for Transport is currently looking at Lower Thames Crossing. The infrastructure we would put in would be purposely designed so that you could link into option C at the Lower Thames Crossing. And that would then enhance not only North Kent's connectivity, but Essex as well.
I just think really, we talked earlier in the day about there's a failure of vision in Britain, isn't there? And you've come up with a vision that's just too big to succeed, isn't it? In the end, it's just too hard and we won't do it, especially now you've got Kent not on your side. What would it take? Boris in charge?
No, I think what it needs is the wider debate that we face right now anyway. We've got a debate on High Speed 1, a recognition that we need to connect to the northern cities, that we've actually got to rebalance the economy. And that's as much about looking at how our economy fits into a global economy. So we've got the railway debate, we've had the nuclear debate. Hopefully we're on the right course there for an energy strategy. We've got an enormous debate around housing coming. And the airport is in the context of those large-scale debates. Certainly, Kent are going to be worried about it. They're going to be concerned. But I didn't hear a single thing, as Clive said in his well-written piece, that is insurmountable. These aren't issues that people haven't faced around the world. They're not issues we haven't faced in this country before, and we've overcome them. We've actually planned, we've made strategic decisions, and we've delivered. There's nothing here that is insurmountable.
Could I make one more point?
Yes.
Something that we haven't heard about today is the fact that there's been very little support from many of the airline operators in supporting the idea of an estuary airport.
Yeah.
I mean, they're not exactly crying up, queuing up and knocking on your door saying, what a marvellous idea. We would love to fly out of a new estuary airport. Heathrow don't want to move. You haven't factored into your figures the compensation would be massive to Heathrow if they're to be shut down against their will and build a new airport in the estuary. The maths just don't add up.
Okay, a quick question for
Well,
the
can
audience?
I just say that the maths do add up, and
I'll
that's
beg your
the
pardon.
reason we developed a business model that we talk to people around the world, people who can't get into Heathrow today, about what they would do with an estuary airport. And when an estuary airport opened, if you took Heathrow's figures, it would be in 10 years. We think more realistic for Heathrow or estuary is 15 years. I think you're right there. The global aviation industry will have completely changed. 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, we hadn't heard of Emirates, Etihad, Qatar Airways. The new carriers coming out of China right now, out of India, out of Latin America, out of the stands, probably in that time frame, out of Africa. Where are they going to go? Those guys, those tail fins are about to start getting painted. They will come here, and that's absolutely critical to our future.
Through Gatwick or Heathrow.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't mind getting somebody to ask a question that hasn't asked one before, if there's possibly somebody at the back there. Yes, okay, let's go.
My name's Jill Moore. I'm one of the Friends of the North Kent Marshes.
Yeah.
I'd just like to say it's not NIMBY to stand up for a globally important wetland that's protected under local, national and international law. The RSPB and the British Trust for Ornithology can see no realistic chance of successfully relocating and mitigating for the effects of an international hub airport in the Thames Estuary on populations of up to 300,000 birds. DEFRA have responded to the Airports Commission saying that they doubt that suitable habitats can be recreated in the UK. Why does Hugh Thomas believe that he knows better than the experts? And can I leave you with a quote?
Yep.
Ours is the marsh country down by the river, and we will fight anyone who tries to destroy it.
Thank you very much. Hugh.
Jill, you know well that the Environment Agency looking at the estuary habitats, the intertidal habitats across the whole stretch of the Hoop Peninsula further in the northern coast back towards London, identifying the habitat loss that is happening anyway. It's not an airport that will destroy that habitat. It may do it quicker, but that habitat is under direct threat now. Environment Agency, other agencies are looking for how habitat replacement is implemented, how those birds are protected, how habitat is recreated. We've got enormous challenges up the whole of the East Coast, from rising sea levels, increased storm severity, saline incursion into farmland. We have enormous problems to tackle around habitat full stop. What we bring to the table is an enormous pot of money that the public purse isn't willing to spend. We bring a focus that allows people to understand the scale of the damage that is being caused, the scale of loss that is being caused, the scale of opportunity that can be created to form new habitat, to mitigate. Certainly, if you look globally, there are many examples of habitat creation on this scale. This is not something which is insurmountable. It's something that's necessary.
Okay, another question from the audience. A gentleman towards the front. Say who you are.
Hello, I'm Matthijs Kulder from the Netherlands. I'm a consultant, and you've mentioned that there's a wrong and the right side of town. Having worked a lot on Paris and Amsterdam, etc., I believe there is a wrong and the right side of town. But I'd like to ask a more profound question about the airport expansion in England. It seems to me that at this time, and it refers a bit to what Ken Livington has said, is it not that in Europe we should, rather than thinking of something new, think how we can make what exists already work much better? Because we're focused with a sort of a systemic question. We have systems in place which the Middle East doesn't have and Asia doesn't have. And we have to care that the systems we have in place work better. I say that because I believe there is no direct correlation between airport capacity and competitiveness. It depends very much what you put in between, and whether you what could be in between for Europe is an innovation in how to make our current systems work better, rather than adding a new.
Thank you very much. I've been wondering all day why we don't just put the price up of flying and then bring down the demand, actually. Anything you'd like to say on that, Paul?
Sorry,
yes.
Is that Paul or Hugh, did you say? Paul, yeah. No, well, I mean, it's my point. When I was chairman of the Regional Assembly, the paper that we produced was suggesting that we could do a lot more to take up the surplus capacity elsewhere before we build additional runways. And I was talking to Chris in the coffee break about maybe a variable APD. If you had no airport passenger duty at Manston Airport, you might have got a few airlines wanting to run aeroplanes out of that airport. But you can't buck the market, but you can sometimes stimulate the market by inducement packages. But however you cut it, I think there is going to be a need in this growing global economy and global population for a bigger hub airport, and one way or another, either Heathrow or Gatwick are going to have to expand. But let's also not forget the opportunity to disperse some of the short-haul leisure flights out of Heathrow into the Stansteads and what we would love to see to the Manstons in Kent.
Don't forget Hugh's proposition is that Heathrow closes. Now, the only way that Heathrow can close, I would suggest, is that the government nationalises it. It's a successful business. They could try CPOing. I suspect it would take forever. So we're nationalising one of Britain's most successful businesses. Now, there isn't a track record of that in this country. The last thing we nationalised were some of the banks which were going down the pan rather rapidly. So is a government seriously going to nationalise one of Britain's biggest industries, a successful industry? I think the answer is pretty obvious.
The government isn't going to nationalise Heathrow. The government is going to set a national policy statement. The government should be looking at the future of this country, our society, its economy. It should be looking at our position in a global economy. It should be setting policy, and that is what will lead to the closure of Heathrow, because Heathrow isn't up to the future challenge. It's politically undeliverable in terms of its scale. Gatwick will do extraordinarily well over the next 15 years, as will Stansted, as will Birmingham, as will Manchester. But what we critically need in that 15-year period is to plan and build a next-generation global hub airport. That's what this country desperately needs, and the sooner we recognise that and get on with it, the sooner we will deliver it. It will not be at Heathrow, and Gatwick will not be the answer with 2 runways.
Thank you, Hugh. Just one final question from the front, and then we're finished.
I'm Anil Iyer from the Association for Consultancy and Engineering. I've got a question for Hugh. Obviously, the solution for Thames Estuary does require blue sky thinking, which you've acknowledged, and you've quoted the High-Speed 1 and the Channel Tunnel. But these are projects which, similar to projects that have occurred elsewhere in the world, and the question of benchmarking your blue sky thinking. Now, Chris Chalk showed a slide this morning which all the cameras started clicking straight away in terms of the relocation impacts. I'm just wondering, is this, how blue is the blue sky?
It's too big a project, basically, and moving too many people in from too far a distance to even get off the ground.
The rest of the world is doing it right now. Okay, Dubai is a relatively small economy. It's got the largest airport, but it is actually building a next generation hub. It's doing it right now. Istanbul is doing just that. If you look at what Istanbul is doing by moving to the other side of the isthmus, moving over to the other side of the peninsula with the new airport, they're moving a city with it. You know, other people are doing this because that is what they require in terms of connectivity for their economy. To say that we can't do that.
The slide showed it was a much bigger scale job. That's the point. It's almost too big a scale to even try.
But to say that we can't do that in the light of 20% population growth by 2031, that we can't plan that in, I just don't buy that. That's, you know, we have the period of time to plan it. We have the period of time to deliver it.
Okay.
There's nothing insurmountable there.
That's
Britain's largest city, if I could just point out, Milton Keynes, which I'm sure most people know, has taken 40 years, the last 40 years, to get to a population of 200,000. That's roughly what we're talking about here, but not 40 years, building it in, I don't know what, 10, 15 years. It's absolutely impossible.
That's fine, thank you. Well, I think we'll leave it on the note. I mean, people just don't like living in Milton Keynes, I suspect. But anyway, that's another point. We've now come to the end of my bit. I started thinking that Heathrow was a good idea, and then I thought Gatwick's the place, really. I'm beginning to come round to the Thames Estuary idea now.